Hello everyone, it's Micah. I wanted to make a follow-up video that was both more succinct and also just some closing thoughts on the Janet Jackson documentary that aired a week ago now. My first video was long and rambling and was just a way for me to document my initial reactions more so than anything else. This video, I want to be a little more to the point and talk about any new takeaways and some of the comments that trickled in on the last video, some responses to that, and looking ahead to Janet's own documentary that's coming up in January. So first off, to recap, my impression of the New York Times documentary, which was entitled Malfunction, The Dressing Down of Janet Jackson, and it aired a week ago on FX, Hulu, and of course produced by the New York Times, part of their documentary series that included the Britney Spears documentaries. One of my points was that the documentary compared unfavorably to the Britney Spears docs, maybe a lack of urgency. Sorry for the photo bomb from Mister Amir, but I'm sure you're probably enjoying looking at him more than me. I don't know. It's been so long since grammar school. Wow. And I never even called it grammar school. I guess it's just a function of when you get a little older, you just start calling things by old-fashioned names too. Craziness. But anyway, yeah, you're very photogenic, buddy. Okay, so he's ruining every effort that I'm making to try to make this succinct. But at any rate, one of my points was the editorial slant of the documentary was odd. It was being marketed as a pro-Janet documentary, but there were way too many loose ends and too many places where they could have drawn reasonable conclusions based on what happened, and they didn't. Most vividly and most explicitly when it came to the actual incident that caused the whole furor over about broadcast decency, when she was accidentally exposed for the infamous 9/16 of a second. And my point specific to that, the documentary's coverage of that point, is that it didn't really take some very obvious cues from the documentary footage and some of the firsthand accounts to really sort of flesh out this idea that Janet did not mean for that to happen. Justin did not mean for that to happen. Whoever was involved in it didn't mean for it to happen. So, and my final point was that Janet's musical integrity has also been called into question over the years, and that played into how this incident was treated also. It wasn't just body image, it wasn't just the way she was judged for her appearance over the years, which the documentary covered very well. There was a lot of other backstory that the documentary could have included that would have made for a more fulsome account of how the incident unfolded and people's reactions to it. The Cliff Notes version of that is if people took Janet more seriously as an artist, they wouldn't have been so quick to dismiss what she did as a stunt. They either would have gone back and said, "Oh, she's an artist with integrity," and they would have given her the benefit of the doubt, or they would have made the incident itself a feminist statement or a political statement. I'm sure if Madonna had done the same thing, that's exactly how some people would have cast it, and it wouldn't have seemed quite so just shilling for attention. But granted, Madonna had her share of PR issues and woes with conservative groups as well, so I'm not saying that she had it easy either, but I think that she would have gotten a little more backup from people in her corner. It just seemed like everything evaporated around Janet, any sort of support and goodwill she had accumulated over the years. So those were my issues with the documentary. I had a handful of comments, and I do want to respond to two of them. One was which was either deleted by YouTube or I'm not really sure, but it basically was your typical sort of well, I won't try to categorize it. I'll just say what the comment said, and it was that I'm tired of this. No one really cares about the incident anyway, and at the very end of the comment, was this: I'm tired of this whole narrative of blame every white man is evil, referring to the way that Justin Timberlake has been portrayed in this documentary, and presumably some of the executives including Les Moonves. So I'm glad that comment was deleted, because I probably would have responded to it. It's definitely hyperbole to say because there are one to two white men in this documentary who are cast in a negative light, and I say 1.5 because Justin Timberlake doesn't come off looking oh so bad in this documentary. Like, one person affiliated with the halftime show actually said he manned up. She actually was happy about the way he dealt with it from a PR perspective, and what she thought was a very straightforward and business-like fashion, which the implication there was that he did what he needed to do to keep his career moving, and Janet fled from the situation. So that perception is part of what fueled the narrative around what happened and what her possible motives were. So even the documentary doesn't have a good versus evil, and it's certainly not racializing it on a person by person basis. And also, 1.5 or two men being demonized does not equal everybody. And talking about racism in our culture doesn't automatically make every white person evil. And some people just can't hear the R word, or they can't hear discussions about race without immediately feeling like they're under attack. And that's essentially where that comment was coming from, as far as I was concerned. And it completely undercut his initial comment, which is that he didn't care. He didn't really come on the thread to talk about how he didn't care. He came on to give his little, oh, by the way, I don't agree with this particular part of the message. So it was sort of a drive-by comment, and at any rate, it has since been deleted, or I can't find it on the comment thread. The second comment, and I don't have the commenter's name up. I meant to call the commenter out by their YouTube handle, but it was within the past day. They said that Janet wanted nothing to do with this documentary, and therefore we shouldn't have expected much of anything anyway. So that's a really good point. I did have some hesitation about even making these videos about the documentary, because Janet wasn't affiliated, and she nor her representatives or anybody affiliated with Janet directly had anything to say. Her brother Tito was, who I assume she's still on good terms with, was in the documentary, and lots of critics who have followed her and music journalists who have followed her over the years were in the documentary, and they had a lot of very favorable things to say. It was generally, like I said, it was generally a pro-Janet editorial slant, but Janet did not have anything directly to do with it. I don't know whether she doesn't like that the documentary took place. So far, I haven't heard any statements about it. But I think because the documentary needed to be made. I thought it was a little weird that it was coming out just 2 months before Janet has her documentary, where presumably she's going to talk at least a little bit about what happened from her perspective, given that it was a notable event in her career, unfortunately. But I will say that ultimately I think that I see the documentary as a good thing, even if it wasn't quite as rah-rah Janet as I hoped it would be. It was good. It was decent. It wasn't on the level of the Britney Spears documentaries. And to me, as a Janet fan, I'm always going to be hypercritical of any piece on Janet, because I'll be able to nitpick any facts or implications that are incorrect or misrepresented. So I'm going to be a little harder on those things. But all in all, I'm glad the documentary was made. It sets up a little bit of conversation around Janet's own documentary, and I like the commenter, and more so looking forward to Janet's documentary and having it told to us, in her own words, like how she feels about the incident, away from the interview questions that have been thrown at her over the years, where she's not really prepared to talk about it or not eager to talk about it. The documentary allows her a forum, to say, as Janet always says in her social media posts, directly from her lips, and I'm happy to hear that. So I think that's a really good post, and it's a really good point to note that, Janet didn't endorse it. I don't know that she is mad that the documentary was made, or if she's just indifferent about it. To me, I'm sure that they have time to go back and edit Janet's documentary to include specific responses to things that might have been implied or stated in the New York Times documentary. And that way, the fact that this came out first could work to its advantage, because Janet can sort of have the last word about some of the things that are said, and set the record straight on those things. So I'm excited about that. At any rate, this is going to close the book on the Super Bowl 2004 incident. I wholeheartedly hope that I don't ever have occasion to talk about this again. My hope is that the Janet documentary in January will kick off a new era in terms of our perception of her and her artistic journey. And I'm hoping that the documentary is also a bit of a PR kickoff for a new project, a new musical project from her. But we'll see. We'll stay tuned. And I'll be back next time with a video about probably something entirely different. If I get enough traction and people want this to be a Janet fan channel, then that's great for me. I can talk about it about Janet and her work at a great deal of length. But at any rate, stay tuned, and I'll talk soon.